I wanted to talk about momentum.
The hardest challenge you'll ever have in leadership is leading yourself.
If I don't know that I'm feeling tired, I'm gonna keep running until it's too late.
Where you lose momentum, we tend to think is down at the bottom, but actually you lose momentum at the top. The goal is for you to know what you're feeling before anybody else does.
How do we ensure as healthy leaders leading teams that we don't try to push momentum at the sake of burnout?
Well, the way you lead when you don't know where you're going is through authenticity and transparency. The say-do gap is the gap between what you say and what you do. The greater the gap, the less the trust.
Welcome to the Thursdays with Tom Leadership Podcast. We're in episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about the idea of momentum and how to generate that, the difficulty it can be to generate momentum, specifically with your team. And then when you finally start feeling like you have something going for you, all of the things that can fall apart, either making a decision that isn't great for the team or for yourself, burning out for the sake of trying to generate momentum. There's so much here that we're going to unpack as it relates to our ability as leaders to generate momentum with our teams and lead effectively. And so Tom's going to be able to speak into that and give us some wisdom as how we can navigate that really well. So I'm excited for us to dive in. Tom?
All right. How you doing, Andrew?
Good.
All right.
Excited for this episode. I wanted to talk to you about momentum and generating momentum. And I think there's a couple interesting things that I often wrestle with. First is the actual generating of momentum, which always feels difficult, and trying to mobilize a team to do something typically new to the business or to their operation. And so it's like moving that, we call it like the flywheel, right? Like pushing that flywheel forward. But then something that I'm realizing is even once you've generated momentum, the moment your focus shifts away from it, it stops. And so it's like you could invest all this time and effort into doing something great, and then the moment your team decides, okay, we've done the thing, we're gonna move on, then that suffers or deteriorates or it stops or finishes, and it's like, holy smokes, how do you generate like real momentum as a team, as a business, so that way you're actually making progress, and then that maintains in some ways itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I look at it from, I can't remember in our episodes if we've talked about the ratchet effect.
No, I don't think we have yet.
Okay, so that's one of my little things that I dreamed up that explains this, and that is the nature of a ratchet. Are you familiar with a ratchet?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's basically designed to capitalize on momentum and effort in this way. So it's got these teeth, and in the contrast, if you contrast that ratchet to a tug of war. Okay, the ratchet, you put all your energy in it. You get to this far, and then it clicks in, and it gives you rest. You don't lose any momentum. You don't lose anything, but it allows you to regroup. Now you focus all your momentum, your energy on the next thing sticking up. So now it's and so by doing that, you're able to maximize the effort. You're continually resting as you go. Now, if you contrast it with tug of war, you've got people on either side, and you can't rest. You just keep going, and so it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's survival. Whoever survives, then you get it. So, but it's exhausting, and typically, even if it's a zero-sum thing. You either win or you lose, and it takes all your effort. And at the end, you don't see anybody doing back-to-back tug of wars.
Right.
You've blown it out. You've done it. So, in terms of teams and in terms of momentum, and one of the things I hear you saying there is kind of how do you maintain what you've gained?
Yeah.
So it's, one step forward and two, not one step forward, two step back.
Right. Right.
But it's actually one step forward, everything you got.
Yeah.
Now there's another analogy that we'll come back to the ratchet, but it's years ago I would take when I was working with Young Life down in Buena Vista, we would take 300 high school kids from Texas, climb up a 13,000 foot peak, Mount Chapman. It was actually under 13. But so my job, I was the leader of the whole thing. And how do you get 300 flatlanders up a mountain like that?
Right.
And so one of the things that I was taught years ago about climbing and about mountaineering is what they call the rest step. And it's sort of like a ratchet, that every step you lock your knee, just like you're going upstairs, and it seems like it's really slow. And, and the guys that really, the younger, football guys, they want to run ahead.
Yeah.
And what they call scrambling. So you're just going from one thing all the way up. But we would limit it to say, we're going to use the rest step. So the key is moving 300 people. The goal is to get them to the top of the summit. And it's a team thing. It's not just who can get to the summit the quickest. So, but and it takes discipline initially because it didn't feel right. It's like, we're never going to get there.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you look at it, and it's sort of time tested, if you're getting a body all the way up, if that's the goal, if the goal is just to get somebody up there, which often can be the case when we're talking about teams in general, is you're using all the energy. The guys with a lot of energy, it's self-centered, and they do their thing, and it's more gratifying and so on. But meanwhile, you got Susie back here and Billy that it can, they're already exhausted and you hadn't even got out of the car. So how do you do that? Well, you have to teach it, and then you practice it, and as you're going up, and it's an interesting thing because as you go up the mountain with the rest step, you discover that you actually, because you're going slower and deliberately, you notice the stuff around you. You notice the beautiful mountains. You notice each other. They have conversations going. When you're scrambling, you're not talking, "Hey Bob, how's it going?"
Right.
So the benefit is that you're actually moving, but it's a way of thinking team. The goal is getting the team to the top. Now, one of the really fun, hard, amazing experiences that I built into it was that, and I explained all this before we left, and people were going, well, whatever. So you got to lead. Key element in this. You got to lead. You can't just assign it. You can't. You have to be a leader, and the leader isn't just the one that runs ahead, and everyone's trying to keep up with. But the leader is teaching it. So we designed it so that we would summit together. So, and this was really hard because when you've been working all day to get to the summit, you start forgetting about the team. You just think, I'm going to get there, and so you can feel guys jockeying, and so as the leader, you got to stop it. So the goal then is, once we get it with about 100 feet or 100 yards of the summit, we would spread out in a circle around the summit. Now, not the backside because it was a cliff.
Right.
that would definitely.
That wouldn't work.
It would slow us down anyway. But there's more people. You can always
They'd
get
fill
more.
it in.
But then together we would we would go up towards the thing, and the reward was huge. That even the tough guy that wanted to do their own thing, you saw everybody moving up, and there was this sort of esprit de corps that took place. So that analogy, the rest step, it's similar to the ratchet.
Yeah.
Ratchet is more of a mechanical, but I think both of them are really helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've lived with both of them, and I've seen it. And so one of the things, the reason you lose momentum is you lose energy. And here's another sort of, it's a metaphor, but it's a teaching by a guy named Deming. L. Deming, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's the guy that Toyota hired to come over and from General Motors. And his theory about all this stuff was that people, the wrong thinking that people didn't want to do good. So the goal of a manager was to get them to do good against their will. Deming was to saying people want to do well. So you go on that assumption, and so your job as a leader is to remove barriers. It's not to whip them harder.
Sure, yeah.
It's to figure out what keeps them from doing that.
Yeah.
So as he did that, then one of the things he did, he was working on assembly lines. And so, the assembly line is really kind of mind-numbing. You're just literally a cog in the wheel yourself. So you do this all day long.
Yeah, totally.
And so one of the things he discovered is all the money that was being wasted on after it went through the line on correcting it. So now we've got to recall these things. So he said, let's do quality in the beginning. So how did he do it? He empowered everybody on the line. So if you were doing the widgets and you saw that something was wrong with the widget, you had the authority and the power to just pull a chain that stopped the whole chain. And because no one knows better what it's supposed to be like than the guy that's doing it.
Right.
And so what that did was so a guy comes to work and he realizes that these cars that are coming out the other end, he can make the connection between what he did and what the product is. And that's when you don't have that, that's the mind-numbing piece. So take that and throw all of those into just your workplace, whatever it is, and momentum. So when you hear that, let me just pause here a little bit and interact on that. What do you hear me saying?
Yeah, I'd love to explore it seems like in both the ratchet analogy and the kind of keeping together as a team and doing that rest step.
Yeah.
That there's a pace to this that's important. You can't just run as fast as you can, hoping that will generate momentum. So I want to explore that a little bit. What does that practically mean to have like a pace to achieve real momentum? And then I think what's fascinating and another piece I want to explore is on the continuation of that. I'm hearing bits and pieces, but I'm still wanting to press in. How do you keep momentum? How do you keep it going afterwards? Is that the empowerment piece you're speaking to? So there's kind of two things. I'd love to know more about the pace. It sounds like that's important to generating real momentum. And then how do you keep that going?
Yeah. Well, again, the key is leadership. And the leader needs to be leading.
Okay.
And so one of the adages that I speak about in that context is that you can't delegate leadership. So I was the head of this whole camp, and I was the one that was leading this up the mountain. It wasn't that I hired somebody else to do it. Now that doesn't mean that if you have a company, then the CEO has to, carry out the trash and etc. But he might. But still, it's where you lose momentum. We tend to think is down at the bottom, but actually you lose momentum at the top. when the leader starts losing his or her momentum, then that translates, it cascades.
Okay.
So one of the ideas of this kind of leadership that's graduated, so to speak, is that it's not just everybody is carrying on what the leader at the top is doing.
Right.
And it's not that it just falls kind of information down to the last. Each piece of it is incorporating it into their world. So if you've got, say 10 people in your office and you've got a office manager and then you've got these people working there and then the office manager is under the CFO. So the idea is not for the CFO who is getting his information from the CEO, for the CFO just to give him the information. Then now you take that information down to the next, etc. What this is talking about is that it's you. It's like you. Everybody is you. That you're transferring not just information, but experience and a relationship. So the momentum, and this goes counter to what most people think, because the momentum starts at the top, and it stays at the top in the sense that it continues. But where you lose momentum is the further it gets away from the message, and it gets away from the message when it's not being incorporated into your life.
Right.
So that now the guys that are at the end of the chain are different. They become a person that's like the guy at the top or the gal at the top. So it's a different, kind of different focus.
Yeah.
So another piece that I think can help in terms of the those analogies with the rest step. So the rest step is built on physiology, and that is the skeleton is designed to bear weight. And the skeleton doesn't use oxygen. It's sort of almost inanimate. I mean, it's got stuff going through it and so on, but its primary purpose is to bear weight. So it's important during the rest step that you're straight and your back is straight and you're stepping up so that your body is not using oxygen to in between. That's the ratchet. So when you're resting on the ratchet, you're gaining more oxygen.
Right.
Now you kind of buck up and you go to the next step. Okay, so and with that idea, the physiology is you got to. And so what is the skeleton? Well, the skeleton is the leadership trail. If the leadership trail is doing its job, then it isn't wearing out the rest of the body. So all of the but so what happens is in that analogy is you lose energy because you're using muscles to bear the weight.
Right.
And when you use your muscles, your quads and your glutes, and then you're using energy and you're tired. But when you transfer that weight to the skeleton, so things are in line now. So if the ratchet doesn't have teeth on it, it's not going to work. Or if the teeth are not very well defined, so it keeps on slipping off.
Yeah.
So both of those kind of work together.
So there's a heavy emphasis on the leader leading.
Yes.
And it sounds like there's a heavy emphasis on the leader also being aware of the pace that they're moving, right? That journey, the trail, so that the team is following appropriately.
Yes.
Right? If the leader's running ahead, you're going to lose momentum because you're leaving everyone behind. And if the leader's not moving enough, you're just going to generate some level of stagnant kind of workplace, right? So there's a pace to that whole thing.
You have a different rhythm.
Right.
You have a start, stop. It's the whole notion is it's steady, slow but steady. It's moving up the mountain.
Yeah.
And it never really increase. This is an interesting thing. It doesn't get any faster for the present. You don't. That's scrambling.
Yeah.
Scrambling, you go hard and you do this, and then you stop. No, it's interesting that when you do that, meanwhile this slow train is coming,
Right.
and often at the same point, you have the train is right as the scrambler. The scrambler's out of energy.
Yeah.
And he may sprint for the next, whatever, and then meanwhile this pace is just moving along.
Huh.
But it's you have, so as a leader, the part of the challenge is to take those guys that are really energetic,
Right.
not to belittle them and say, well, but what I would do is I would challenge them and say, if you really want to show your stuff, go all the way to the end of the line. And then you can, and help the people at the back, because it'll take twice as much energy. So if you really want to flex your muscles,
Yeah.
you want to show everybody how, you can sprint all the way to the back and then help to the top. When you get to the top, you can sprint all the way to the back again.
Right.
So and we can all celebrate, these guys are really strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because that's a team mentality, and a part of being leading your kind of really energetic members is you don't punish them. You rechannel it. You take that energy that they want to be, and you challenge them
Yeah.
and reward them for going to the end of the line and helping Susie and Billy. And it's a multiplication.
Yeah, I love that. I think, and I want to tap into this too a little bit. It's like, as you've seen great leaders manage their team's energy well, sounds like this is one of them. One of the components is recognizing kind of those higher or in their mind they're saying, I'm the higher performer.
Well,
Look
I'm
at me,
the
I'm running ahead. Yeah,
Right,
it's like
yeah.
love that. How can you take that and invest that back into the team to help the team move forward? What are some other ways you've seen really highly effective leadership help manage the pace and energy of the team and maybe even themselves? Because to your point, like as a leader, it's really easy to get ahead of everyone else, and that's just as unhelpful as moving too slow or whatever, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on energy management there.
Yeah. Well, the key thing there as a leader is to know your people and to know the uniqueness, not to treat them all the same. So if you've got 3 stallion people that can run circles around everybody else, the goal is not to say, stop, whoa, boy, whoa, get back into the, whoa.
Right. Whip them right back into place.
It's to rather say, all these metaphors all blend in, but it's rather to know what's really going on inside of them. What is it? Why is it that he or she feels compelled to blow everybody else away? And so there could be really good reasons, because they really care about where we're going, and they think that this is the better way. So this is where it all intersects. So it ultimately, as you get to know your people, all of them, not just the stallions, that you get to know them, then you fashion things around them, what allows them to do their best. You see, if you're a sports fan, and we are, and we talk about coaches, like in particularly with the Broncos, we're talking a lot about, how they've adjusted and are getting better and so on. One of the things they talk about is that a good coach builds his system for the players that he has. So if he says, our system is we throw long every single time, and you got guys that can't even run more than 20 yards, but they can get 20 yards quicker than anybody. So you adapt the system. You know your players. You know that, and by the way, that starts with you. You know yourself. The number we talked about, I think one of our other episodes, one of the main pieces of being a good CEO or just a leader is self-awareness. So if I'm the leader of this thing going up the mountain and I am not aware of my own limitations, the pace that I'm going, I may think is what it should be, but I'm finding that actually I can't do it. Or I'm actually adversely affecting because I'm going faster than everybody else.
Yeah.
So so back to the how do you keep that momentum and how do you keep people engaged? So one of the other principles is trust. So how do you build trust? You build trust by being authentic and transparent, and then following through the say-do gap. You say what you do, and you do what you say. So as you're leading, so I'll give you an example. In that we had a group in that 300 people in this particular week that were from a delinquent home in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And they're all wild guys that had no idea about what we're doing, and they were all kind of alpha dogs. And they kept on pushing, and they kept on trying to get around me. And at one point, I had the whole group strung up the mountain because with 300 people going at that pace, you can actually see all the way to the top.
Right, yeah.
And these guys kept on fighting, and I had, by the way, along the way, this is a piece, we would stop. We didn't just go without stops, but we would stop strategically to have food.
Right.
And water.
Yeah, totally.
And so you're not, but it was minimum compared to what you would be otherwise.
Right.
So these guys kept on going around. Now, I was getting fed up with it. So in terms of self-awareness, it really ticked me off.
Yeah, yep.
And so everybody's watching this, and the leader of that group, there were about 10 of these guys, went up around me, turned around and faced me, and said, "I'm on an ego trip. What are you going to do?"
Wow,
just challenge me. I got 300 feet
right in front of everyone.
And so what I did, just to show my mature leadership, I grabbed him by the lapels, threw him down on the ground.
Oh my gosh.
And said,
put him in his place.
I put him in his place, and that isn't necessarily the way to do it, but it was a part of me knowing me, and it wasn't the right way. But interesting is everybody was,
oh, I'm sure, yeah,
and including the other 9 guys that were the tough guys,
right.
And interestingly, from that point on, they were with me because I was sort of the alpha dog there.
Yeah.
But I was compassionate, but it was clear that I'm the leader.
Totally.
And you can't do that.
Yeah.
Now take that into the workplace, and it's profound. One of the reasons it doesn't perpetuate this momentum is the leader doesn't have the whatever to step into it. And sometimes, you need to. You just say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to. It's interesting, even in today's thing with Trump and all of this new stuff going on. From my perspective, and I know other people would disagree and so on, but I see him in many ways as that alpha dog that is finally saying the message from the people was, we got to change this, and you're not going to change it by talking about it. So and then as soon as you start saying, well, we're actually going to do this, people start getting freaked out. Well, and the same thing on going up the mountain. It's like, oh, how are we going to do this?
Right.
So you got it. It wasn't that then I went up ahead and just kept on, or I came behind him and with a whip saying, "You guys shut up," etc. I was with them then, and they're watching me. And by the way, a part of even that analogy is them seeing me blow it. I lost it.
there's like an authenticity, transparency piece about
transparency.
that. Yeah, yep.
I wasn't faking it.
Yeah.
I was in this too. I wasn't in a helicopter to come up ahead and go, "Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to see you." No, I was feeling the same stuff, and I hit my limit, and then the question is, what do I do after that? And I had this group. They were following. Everyone was a little tense at that point, but when we summited together, there was this energy, and even seeing these tough guys holding back and letting Betty and Susie and Billy come up to the front. I mean, it's powerful. So when you have that dynamic, you literally can climb mountains.
Yeah. I love I love what is possible when a leader leads effectively. One of the things that you kind of nodded at and I'm curious about is like there was a moment where you had to step up and lead in a way that would say like, hey, I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going, I need you to kind of follow me. What happens when you don't know where you're going and you're leading a team towards momentum?
Yeah.
And it's like, gosh, I don't feel qualified, I don't feel capable, I'm in a position of leadership. How would you advise someone in that position?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question because that's real time. It's easy to, and that's why what I'm sharing, these were real things for me. And so if you look at that, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I had an idea, but even at that, I hit the limit. And so then I moved into a realm where I wasn't even thinking. I was just reacting. And so that whole concept of how do you lead when you don't know where you're going? Well, the way you lead when you don't know where you're going is through authenticity and transparency. To say to the team, you know what? Because by the way, they can tell. You don't know your butt from a hole in the ground, as they say.
Yeah, they know. They know.
And to fake it, which often happens because the leader feels like if they know the old adage, don't let them see you sweat. Now, that doesn't mean that you freak out, but you might. But like I did, I kind of, you would never kind of advise, here's what you do with high school kids that are out there. You grab them by and you throw them down on the ground and choke them.
Right.
In today's world, I'd probably be arrested.
Yeah.
Or or the other 9 would be on me beating the stew out of it.
Yeah.
But you blow it. And you get to a precipice that is wrong. So even using the same with the mountain, you may have plotted what you thought was the right way. Now you're looking over a cliff and you don't just go, well, this is wrong, but we're moving ahead. You turn around and you say, you know what? I blew it. I've misread the map. And by the way, as you're probably wondering, we're at the edge of this cliff, and you're wondering how we're going to get out of this. And at that point, you can say authentically, I'm not sure. Let's look at it. I'm going to look at it, and I'm open to what, and maybe somebody else goes, well, did you see over here? There's a... So... but the traditional, in my opinion, ineffective way is now the leader bears all of the weight, and now you're switching back to the ratchet. So now you're saying, we're not going to do the ratchet anymore. We're going to do the tug of war. So everybody dig in. And if you let go, we die.
Yeah.
Well, you can take that same energy and you can say, okay, what's the next step? And that's really the ratchet thing. So when people know in your team that what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah.
And
You
so
might be faking it, but
don't
they can
fake
see
it.
they can see right through it.
Don't fake it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel great. But what it does is it gives permission for other people to be authentic and transparent. And if the boss isn't authentic and he's just yanking your chain all the time and acting like he's got it together, I mean, we've all been probably in situations on both sides of that. More likely, you've been on the bad boss side of it, but you also probably have been the bad boss if you've been around. So it's important that's how it's trust.
Yeah.
So if you're saying one thing, the say, and you're doing another, the do. So the say-do gap is the gap between what you say and what you do. The greater the gap, the less the trust. The less the trust, the longer it takes, the more it costs. So that's kind of a run at that. Circle back, or
it's so fascinating. There's so many young leaders and young professionals, I feel like, that end up at the cliff and feel like what you were mentioning. I need to know what I'm doing. I need to know where I'm going. I have to have it figured out. My team can't see me struggling. I was hired to not be at the cliff, right? It's like I was hired to get us to the mountain, and so there's this undue, and often it's their own stress and anxiety, not necessarily, and sometimes it is organizational stress as well being put on you. But I'm curious, and I love that flip of being like, to turn around and actually be authentic and transparent, and then invite the team to figure out a solution together. I often feel like leaders don't do that, and they instead try to trudge through their own inability to move forward to the top, and that ultimately, and I'm sure you've seen it, I've seen it all the time, that leads to burnout all the time.
Yep.
And it's like, one of the things that I want to kind of wrap this particular conversation up with is like, in some circles, momentum and burnout feel like they're very close together.
Yep.
That you run until you're so exhausted
Yep.
that you're just done. And ultimately that might even contribute to why things don't continue moving forward afterwards.
Yep.
There's just no energy to actually do it. And so I'm curious on your thoughts with, as we look at the ratchet and how we can pace ourselves, as we look at making sure the team's moving forward, and sometimes moving forward in a direction that's a cliff and having to turn around. How do we ensure, as healthy leaders leading teams, that we don't try to push momentum at the sake of burnout?
Yeah. Well, it starts, I think, it's a good question. I think it comes back to leadership and self-awareness. So if you think about, pay attention to what's going on inside of you, to say, and like in the whole discussion, which we won't go into now, but about emotional intelligence, EI, that the number one thing that is you're in control. You learn how to regulate your emotions, not your feelings. The feelings ebb and flow, but you understand what's going on inside of you. And like Daniel Goleman talks about in that his book about EI, is that the goal is for you to know what you're feeling before anybody else does. And it tends to be just the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's so we're at the cliff, and we got these people behind us, and so you were saying, what's going on inside of me? I'm afraid. I'm ticked at the guy that told me that. I'm, whatever those things are.
Men are terrible at this.
Yeah.
If we just from a gender perspective too, I think, and I don't your perspective on like how you've seen women leaders handle this, but I feel like men particularly are really, they're not great at recognizing their own emotions.
No, it's not even one of the variables.
Yeah.
and ironically, it's one of the primary variables that affect what you do.
Yeah.
And because we're not aware of it, we think we're being rational and good leader, and so by raising our voice and looking at the person and going, meanwhile, even there you're not aware of what you're even doing.
Right. Yeah.
But the people that you're trying to lead, now you're triggering in them the guy or the gal that is more sensitive to that is now shutting down, saying, "Well, I see something, but I'm not going to say anything because Waldo the boss is going to tear me a new one."
Right.
So I back up. But if Waldo the boss is aware that what's really going on here is I'm afraid, I'm embarrassed, I'm feeling tired, all of those things. If you're not aware of that, then you're more dangerous because you're going to just operate on one thing. Just say anger. I'm ticked. This shouldn't happen. And Billy, you caused it. And Susie, you're the worst. And now what do we do?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So ideally, there's this sense of self-awareness of going, what's going on? All right, I'm angry. I'm scared. All right, how do I then make decisions based on that? But it comes back to leadership. It comes back to the leader, as Edwin Friedman talks about in The Failure of Nerve, is to be a non-anxious presence in the midst of a chronically anxious organization. Yeah. Or it can be non-anxious presence in the midst of a chronically or a very difficult situation right now.
Yeah.
It's not even this big with the organization. It's like we got 10 people here, and here's what I'm thinking, feeling, so on. And by the way, sometimes, back to the ratchet, you just need to make the call as the leader. And that's one of Friedman's things, is the lack of decisiveness. That there's a risk when you decide.
Yeah.
And if you even look at the word decide, the root of that word is cide, C-I-D-E, which in Latin and Greek, where the origin comes from, means to kill. And so decide, when you decide something, the reason it's so hard is it means killing something. You're letting go of something, and you're risking something. And so, and therefore, that the dependence on data, it says, I don't have to make a decision. I'll let the science speak, or I'll let the data speak. Well, the data can't make decisions.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with having data. You need to. But then ultimately, the leader looks at all of that and decides. And that means that it may be wrong. It may be right.
Yeah.
But you're letting go of your presuppositions. And so how do we then become better decision makers? And it starts with being confident in who you are and being aware of who you are and not being a non-anxious. So I'm not going, oh no, there's a cliff here. And
totally,
I might be feeling that on the inside, but first I need to feel it and be aware. You know what? You're scared. Just breathe here. Okay, what can you know? What data is available? So you may see, well, there's a cliff there, and there's a something here, and that's data, but that doesn't make the decision for you. You consider there's a cliff here, and there's this hole here, but there's also the wind is picking up, coming through. Now that's new data, and then now you're sitting there, the wind and the cliff, and all your people are going, what do we do?
Yeah.
And so that's where, and again, the term that Friedman uses, you get imaginative gridlock. That you quit imagining, you quit trying to think of beyond the data.
Yeah.
And that's usually where the answer is. It's beyond the data. The data just goes 2 + 2 is 4, 4 + 4 is 8. Okay, you got that. But it doesn't say there's a guy in front of you with a gun. There's a cliff over here.
Right.
You go, those are, I don't have access to that data. So I'm going to have to make the decision on what I have. But I have to decide. And that's, again, why Friedman's book is called The Failure of Nerve. People don't decide because they don't have the confidence, the internal strength or awareness to say, I've realized that if I make this decision, it may mean that I die. I might, in the business, I might lose my job. I really feel like this is wrong, what we're doing. My boss thinks I'm an idiot already. If I confront him on this, I might lose my job. So the approach is, you, as a leader, you're looking at what's on your insides, what's at stake, what can I do about it, and maybe say I'm on a dead end. And sometimes that's where you end up. There's a cliff here, there's a cliff here, cliff here, and so you may say, well, we're going to figure out some imagination. We're going to let everybody give me your shirts. We're going to tie them into a rope, and then we're going to use that. In fact, it's, I don't know if you remember the movie or the show MacGyver.
No.
Did you ever hear of that?
No. I feel like I've heard the name before.
Yeah, well, MacGyver was a really amazing guy. He, because no matter what the situation was, he would figure it out.
Yeah.
So like with the stuff that's available, so like just what I was describing, we've got cliff,
Right.
no way to go. What are we going to do? And he goes, and he grabs a branch, and then does this and says, everybody give me your shirts. Knows how to tie the knot. Next thing you know it, they're belaying down the face of this cliff.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the imagination, and if you didn't have that leader decision, we're going to do this. And usually, in his case, if you didn't act quickly on it, it's you're going to die. So you got to make these decisions. First responder. So I think the big question, spiraling back a little bit, was how do you maintain the momentum? How do you gain the momentum? And then, in summary, kind of it begins with you, and that's the part we don't like. We think, well, and it doesn't mean that we can't get help. It starts, though, on our inside. You lead from the inside out. The hardest challenge you'll ever have in leadership is leading yourself. And basically, if you can't lead yourself, why would you be able to lead somebody else? And the problem with that, too, is you can't escape you.
Right. Yeah. You're stuck with
you. You can get on a plane and fly to Nairobi.
That's right.
But guess who you meet when you get off the plane?
Yeah. Well, I love, I think for me, like a takeaway, and it's interesting because when you're in the busyness of work, the idea of slowing the pace down to understand how to lead more effectively and understand yourself better seems like wasted time.
Yeah.
But it's never the case. And so it's like slow down, recognize, understand what you're feeling, what you're going through. Be willing to be transparent and honest in situations where you just don't know. Invite collaboration, invite that same level of transparency into those conversations, because you might generate a better idea or a better solution because of that vulnerability. And then to the momentum often leads to burnout piece. Yeah, I love the idea that you're saying of like, I really have to understand how I'm feeling as I'm moving.
Yeah.
Like if I don't know that I'm feeling tired, I'm gonna keep running until it's too late. If I don't know I'm feeling frustrated about a part of the process, I'm gonna overwhelm my team with my emotion. If I'm feeling confused and I don't recognize I'm feeling confused, I'm gonna lead out of a fake authenticity, and then everyone's gonna know because it's so obvious when you're faking it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, for me to continue to grow as that healthy leader, and the encouragement for everyone else listening, it's like, take the diligent time to really understand how to lead yourself, know yourself, wrestle with your own emotions, which again, for guys, at least for me, is it's certainly a challenge. And then be willing to be vulnerable about where you are in that.
Yeah. Well, and I'd throw in there, just circling back a little bit on the ratchet. So the ratchet picture is important because built into the ratchet is rest. And built into the rest step is rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the ratchet, the rest is a mechanical. It's built in the structure of the machine. In the rest step, it's mechanical also, but it's also organic. It's a person. It's affected by what you're feeling and so on. The ratchet doesn't know. But both of them, the thing it has in common is rest.
Yeah.
So it's in the rest that you have the time and the awareness to take note of what am I feeling. But if you're in the tug of war, you don't ever let go.
Yep.
You know, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that's a famous adage, but you see it. You know, if you got all these big bulky guys, and that everybody is holding on, and and then you got, Zelda and Waldo in there. They're going, ooh, this is feeling not good, and it's over.
Totally.
So if you go the ratchet, so we ought to have the ratchet in our daily life. We go and then we need to stop. And in terms of the biblical idea that God built into Sabbath.
Rest. Yes.
And he said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So you can get hooked on the mechanics of the ratchet, but the basic principle is that we need to rest. And it's in that rest that we can slow down. And in Sabbath, it fundamentally has to do with trust. If I stop, am I going to lose the whole thing? Do I build into my mechanism that ratchet or that rest step?
Yeah.
And if we don't, then we're thinking like this, and everything. It's like, well, I think that know, and so. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Meanwhile, you got 20 people behind you going, "Hey, when are we gonna get moving?"
Yeah.
So that's the, and then you're thinking, "I can't stop." If I stop, then I'm going to lose everybody. So it's an ongoing, in a sense, discipline and way of thinking that we're building in the ratchet to our daily life, to our business life, to our marketing life. I mean, it affects everything. So how are we going to market our product? We'll just keep on going. What? Let's stop and see, how is our marketing going? Well, we haven't sold anything for 2 years.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, because we're so lost in, what we're doing. We didn't even realize that we were here. Now we're here. And how did we get there?
Yeah.
Well, we took all the teeth off the ratchet, and we've gone back to the tug of war.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Throwing a lot of stuff at you there.
Yeah, I mean,
Those
it's
are great
such a
questions.
discipline. No, this was a great conversation. I appreciate the insights. Yeah, it's a discipline, but you're right. You can never engage in the process unless you slow down. That's it. It's like you can never start that process unless you make time in the whirlwind of your day to slow down and to your point, reflect and assess.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just gonna be caught up. But it's such a great lesson. And I think when we start to do that, we'll finally begin to see some of these pieces start to click, and I think that'll propel us forward to real momentum with ourselves and then with our team. So that's great. Appreciate the conversation, Tom, as always.
Yeah, same. Great questions. I look forward to more of it. And you're one of the things I appreciate about working together on this is it's really sort of perpetuated by your curiosity. And I think we talked about the idea of being curious. You see the issue and you say, well, let me look beyond that. What's beyond it? So it's fun being with you.
Yeah, no, this has been great. This has been awesome.